perceived to be a tension between promoting research and protecting the subject. Right? You're pro-research or you're pro-subject. I mean, that there may or may not be a tension.
Well, I do think there's always going to be some level of skepticism that you can advocate for both. I don't know why. It all goes back to the ongoing concerns about are we conflicted? Is there a conflict of interest? And honestly, I've served on and worked with IRBs in very different settings. I've served on an industry or commercial IRB. I now work at an academic institutional IRB. I have worked at IRBs at research institutes that were like the academic model and as like Excerpt with FHI, all unaffiliated. And yet somebody can point out why they potentially have this conflict of interest in reviewing the studies that they do, because ultimately it's in their best interest to get it approved. Now, I don't actually believe that it's in their best interest. I mean, I'd like to think that the IRBs are part of a collaborative process, and if they can improve the research, it's their job to do so. I also have a lot of faith personally in the scientific world that when a protocol gets to the IRB, whether it's from industry or from a large research network, that a lot of good thought's gone into it and careful review, and that people typically aren't coming to the table with studies where you look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's like the most unethical thing ever. I like to think that for the most part, the kind of research that people want to do is not inherently unethical to start with. There may be challenges based on the populations or the ways they want to do certain things or how they're going to handle informed consent, but I think they're addressable challenges. And so I think the IRBs can do their job, and if that contributes to research being viewed as a good thing, I don't see a problem with it. I don't know that IRBs are out there advocating for research, but I have no problem with the research community doing that. At the end of the day, a lot of the research that goes on is ultimately, I'd like to think, in the public's interest. I mean, we want cures to diseases. We would love to find a cure for HIV, and we shouldn't be ashamed to admit that. We also shouldn't say that, well, because we're advocating for that, then we can't trust the people that are reviewing and putting these research studies together. What I find particularly interesting is that when we look at the problems in research or the perceived scandals of the last decade, the last 15 years if we go back, they're quite isolated, and they're, in hindsight, have been fairly easy to pick apart. The Gelsinger study's certainly been through the ringer from a media perspective, and it's been something we've talked about and sort of in a post-mortem have said, here are some places we could have done better. But I think it's a fairly isolated case. When we do our At Your Doorstep primer training presentations, when we look at the real scandals in the research world, most of our examples are from 40, 50, 60 years ago. I mean, one of the biggest scandals of the last 2 years was the Guatemala research. Well, that was from the 1940s. We shouldn't be sort of coloring the research of today with things that we all acknowledge were really bad 50, 60, 70 years ago. That's, again, not to say things are perfect now, but I think we have to take into account that the research world, I think, has come a long way in that sense. To me, nothing has replaced Tuskegee as like the one thing we're going to go to in our trainings and say this is like the granddaddy of bad research is Tuskegee. We haven't found a replacement for that yet. And that came to light, 40 years ago now. So, I'd like to think that the research world, through a combination of regulation and better understanding and better oversight, has done a pretty good job of reforming itself and understanding the right way to do research. And it won't be perfect. The support trial debate's a big part of that, and even on that one, opinions are all over the place. Very strongly worded endorsements of the research and very strongly worded denouncements of the research. I don't think there were a lot of strong endorsements of Tuskegee when it first came out or to this day. So it's, to me, that really says something.